This is the famous hobby pioneer Bob Lemke. He's appearing at What's It Day at Sports Fest. Bob, how did you start collecting cards? What memories do you have?
I have memories of baseball cards go back to when I was 4 years old or less. Buying wax packs at the local stores. I had three older brothers, and they all collected, off and on. But I collected baseball cards from 1954 through very early 60s, and then gave it up for 10 or 15 years, and then got active again in the mid 70s.
Do you remember, I remember the moment where I said, you know what, this is really for me. Do you remember when you really took a liking to collecting at least sports memorabilia cards?
No, because it's just something that I grew up with, something I always did. So, after I got out of it in high school and stuff, and then started, I became aware in the 70s when I was working in the coin division for Krause that one of the guys in the coin hobby showed me a copy of SCD from about 1974 or something. And I looked at it and I couldn't believe there was this big, thick magazine with full of cards and memorabilia and stuff. And so I jumped on that and got a subscription and stuff. Started reading and writing. I did some writing for him back in the years before SCD was bought by Krause in 1981.
You basically were the reason why we bought it, right? Like, you brought it to Chet Krause?
Yeah, around 1980, I was looking at the card hobby, and it seemed like there was a lot of parallels between where the card and memorabilia hobby was in 1980 and the way the coin hobby had been much earlier. And Chet always had a philosophy that for hobby publishing, that every hobby needed a collector-to-collector newspaper like SCD. They needed a big reference catalog. They needed a colorful newsstand magazine that would bring people in who weren't dyed-in-the-wool collectors, and they needed a ongoing price guide. So we decided in 1980 we'd get into all of that. So we went out and bought SCD. Within a few years we acquired some of the other competition. We started the standard catalog of baseball cards. Our first publication, when we first approached the owners of the magazines, nobody was interested in talking to us. So we told them, look, we're going to be going out on the newsstand with a color magazine. It's going to be 100,000 copies, which was, maybe 20 times what anybody else had done to that point. And once we came out with that, they realized we were going to be serious competition. So they made our approaches to purchasing their stuff a lot easier.
You also brought the standard catalog of baseball cards to Krause Publications. Can you talk about how important that book is to the hobby?
Well, like Chet's philosophy that a hobby needs a standard reference catalog. They had just finished up the first several editions of the standard catalog of World Coins, which even back then was a telephone book size project. And there was really nothing of a similar nature for baseball cards at that point. There was Bert Sugar's old Sports Collector's Bible was kind of a small format thing that there was very little in the way of illustration, and checklists weren't real complete. So we decided to go out and be as comprehensive as possible. And I got involved in it, and I always wanted to keep expanding it. Keep adding different sets and different collectibles to it. So it just kept growing year after year.
Did you ever think it would get as big as it has?
Yeah, I figured once we got out there with a few editions, people started coming to us with stuff that wasn't in the catalog, and they'd say, hey, I've got this set that you don't have listed. So we'd checklist it and get a picture and write it up and get it into the next edition.
How often do you find that you come to conventions like this and see that there's cards that, like vintage cards that aren't in the book?
Not much anymore.
Joe, could you come to the front door, please?
The last few years, the last 10 years, the internet's really taken over the role of being the place where you see stuff that you hadn't seen before. If you go on sites like eBay, and are just scrolling through looking at stuff, you're always going to run into something that's new and different. And then they have forums, the various vintage card collector forums on there. You got guys all over the country coming up with new stuff.
Do you have any stories about finding cards for the standard catalog that you were surprised that even existed, or?
I was always surprised when we would come up with one for a set that had been known for 50 years, like the Buttercream Babe Ruth, or the Buttercream set was, I believe it was 29 cards were known, and that was all it was checklisted, and it seemed like such an odd thing. And there was no Babe Ruth in the set, but all the other stars of the day were in it. And then back in 1983 in Chicago, Rob Lifson turned up with one, and he wrote about it in his recent auction. Actually, two of them showed up at the same time. Just shocked the heck out of everybody in the business because they'd never seen even one. It made a lot of people suspicious, but there's no doubt that they were both legitimate.
That's a good story. Well, thanks for sharing all that with us.
Yep.